If you feel yourself saying, things have been so crazy, I've been so busy, or there's so much going on, listen, this conversation is for you, especially considering that this is the holiday season and time always seems to be of the essence or lacking. Keep listening through to the end of this episode because I'll be sharing 5 things that you can begin to do to start creating more time and energy for yourself, even in the midst of this crazy busy season. Sounds good? I think it's something you may enjoy, so let's hop into it.
Hey guys, you're listening to the Journey to Purpose podcast with Erica Lasan. The road to joy and purpose can feel unfamiliar, uncomfortable, and sometimes, because others don't always understand it, it can be isolating and lonely. For almost 30 years of my life, I identified myself through roles and titles that put pressure on me to perform, but often left me feeling empty and void of purpose. But things got real when I discovered I'd be gaining yet another new title, that of mommy. It was at that point of surrender that I chose joy. Now as a joy strategist and creative consultant, I help women and entrepreneurs in transitional phases of life find joy, purpose, and healing in what's next. In this podcast, we dive deep into stories, lessons, and transparent conversations to uncover vision manifesting joy gems that are sure to help you rediscover, reconnect, and recommit to your purpose and identity and joy, one feel-good thing at a time.
Hey guys, thanks for tuning into another episode of the Journey to Purpose podcast with me, Erica Lasan. Apparently, I owe you an apology. I'm always talking about creating more time, energy, and space for joy, but apparently what I did not do, and I am so sorry, is that I skipped a step. A couple of weeks ago, I put out a survey on my social media, namely on TikTok. If you have yet to follow me over on that platform, you may want to do so. I put out a survey asking you what you need the most support with. Is it time? Making more time for yourself, understanding how you can begin to do that? Is it creating more energy so that you're more energized to do the things that bring you joy? Or is it that you need more help making room and routines around self-care in your life? And almost unanimously, the results came back that you all are starved for time. Now that we're at the end of November and Thanksgiving is this week, you need to have some time to prioritize yourself because for the next 4 to 6 weeks, everybody's going to be busy. However, let's talk about that, shall we? The first part of reclaiming your time is to stop glorifying the idea of being busy. There are so many women that I speak to that wear this idea of busyness and being busy as a badge of honor. In glorifying the idea of busyness, you are killing your time, you're draining your energy, and you're disempowering your community. So in today's episode, we're going to talk about how you can begin that process of reclaiming your time, creating more time, by building up your community without sacrificing yourself in the process. I'll be sharing 3 stories from scripture about individuals who were not only to reclaim their time, but in a lot of ways save their communities without sacrificing themselves. Though, I'm not going to lie, there were a couple of close calls. However, based on the 5 tips that I'll be sharing with you at the end of this episode, they were able to build themselves up, empower their communities, and create success for everyone around them without having to burden themselves and themselves alone in the process. Let's dive in, starting now. We're starting in the book of Esther, chapter 4. Are you ready? If you don't, get your Bibles out. Just kidding. Ish. I always have one by my side. Esther chapter 4. When Mordecai learned about all that had been done, he tore his clothes, put on burlap and ashes, and went out into the city, crying with a loud and bitter wail. He went as far as the gate of the palace, for no one was allowed to enter the palace gate while wearing clothes of mourning. And as news of the king's decree reached all the provinces, there was a great mourning among the Jews. They fasted, wept, and wailed, and many people lay in burlap and ashes. When Queen Esther's maids and eunuchs came and told her about Mordecai, she was deeply distressed. She sent clothing to him to replace the burlap, but he refused it. Then Esther sent for Hatash, one of the king's eunuchs, who had been appointed as her attendant. She ordered him to go to Mordecai and find out what was troubling him and why he was in mourning. So Hatash went out to Mordecai in the square in front of the palace gate. Mordecai told him the whole story, including the exact amount of money Haman had promised to pay into the royal treasury for the destruction of the Jews. Mordecai gave Hatash a copy of the decree issued in Susa that called for the death of all Jews. He asked Hatash to show it to Esther and explain the situation to her. He also asked Hatash to direct her to go to the king to beg for mercy and plead for her people. So Hatash returned, I hope I'm saying this name right, Hatash or Hatak? Hatak, maybe that's what it is. So Hatak returned to Esther with Mordecai's message. We're now at Esther 4:10. Then Esther told Hatak, or Hatash, oh, it feels so bad, to go back to relay this message to Mordecai. All the king's officials and even the people in the provinces know that anyone who appears before the king in his inner court without being invited is doomed to die unless the king holds out his gold scepter. And the king has not called for me to come to him for 30 days. So Hatash gave Esther's message to Mordecai. Mordecai sent this reply to Esther. Don't think for a moment that because you're in the palace, you will escape when all other Jews are killed. If you keep quiet at a time like this, deliverance and relief for the Jews will arise from some other place, but you and your relatives will die. Who knows if perhaps you were made queen for just a time as this. Then Esther sent this reply to Mordecai. Go and gather together all the Jews of Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. My maids and I will do the same. And then, though it is against the law, I will go in to see the king. If I must die, I must die. So Mordecai went away and did everything as Esther had ordered him. Oh my goodness. So much to talk about in this passage. But first I want to highlight a couple of things. All right. The first thing is that Mordecai didn't keep his trouble to himself. Okay, he made sure that everybody around him knew what he was feeling, but more importantly, why. He was distressed. He was grieved. He was upset that his people, himself included, would all be killed on account of, well, the story about Mordecai and his beef go way back. The thing I really appreciate about this is that Esther, seeing her uncle in distress, though she could have just thought, well, that's his problem. You know, she went to send him clothes, but he wasn't trying to accept it. The pain that he was feeling wasn't something that could be bandaged with simple clothing. He needed her to do something. And so he spoke to her and told her exactly what was troubling him. Now, there's something to note about how Queen Esther responded, okay? Because her response was, I don't know if I can, because the king hasn't answered me yet, all right? Like, if I do this, I could very well die. And her uncle, so she stated her fears, right? But then she told her uncle what her fears were. And her uncle doubled down saying, listen, you may think that you're avoiding this will shield you, but understand that your life is at risk too. Don't think because you're avoiding this that the king won't come after you too. Don't forget who you are and don't forget where you came from. Letting her know that she may have been called to her position of power for the very reason of saving all of the people. She may have been made queen because the story of how she became queen was also very juicy. But there are 3 key things that I want to note about Queen Esther's response. And it starts in verse 13. Go and gather together all the Jews of Susa and fast for me. 1. First thing is Queen Esther called for backup. She asked for support. Okay. She was like, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to need an army of prayer behind me. Okay. And she specified exactly how this should be done. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. My maids and I will do the same. So not only was she taking responsibility for what needed to be done for caring for her community, again, she was going to be approaching the king on their behalf, but she was saying, if I'm going to do this, I need to make sure that you guys have my back. And in her saying this, she didn't mean having her back with swords and weapons the way most people would think they need to be defended. She wanted to make sure she had spiritual defense. But here's the kicker, okay? This is something that we're going to talk more about in a bit. She also shared that she and her maids will be praying and fasting as well. She didn't rely strictly on her own prayer and fasting, nor did she expect that people would be praying and fasting for her without her doing her own part. Everybody was meant to be a part of this process. And then lastly, after specifying exactly how this was going to happen, then she said she would accept the responsibility or consequences of whatever would happen. She would go see the king, and if she must die, then she must die. If you don't know how the story of Queen Esther goes, it's a marvelous book of the Bible. Oh my goodness, such a juicy story. She ends up saving all her people in a very unexpected way. And her uncle, Mordecai, was elevated in the kingdom and all was well. However, I want you to keep in mind all of the points that we highlighted about Queen Esther as we discuss today's second story in the Bible, which is the story of Daniel, the prophet Daniel at that. In the book of Daniel, there is Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, also known as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. But I'll give you the brief synopsis. All right, in chapter 1, we basically learned the story about how Daniel became a part of the king's court. Keep in mind, Daniel and his friends are exiles. They are in captivity. They were noble children of Judeans who were led into exile. However, chapter 1 of the book of Daniel highlights how they were elevated in rank and status in the Babylonian court and the Babylonian kingdom due to their spiritual gifts and Daniel's obedience. Basically, there was a whole story about how everyone in the king's court was expected to eat a certain diet of like wine, meat, and all of these other things. And Daniel was like, nah, I'm good on that. And the person that was looking out for him was like, listen, that sounds great, but I don't want you to get all sickly and scrawny looking, because if it's found that you aren't eating what everybody else is eating, and that's the reason why your appearance is suffering, then I'm going to get in trouble. And Daniel was like, listen, all right, how about you try me? Let's do a test. For 10 days, I'll only eat vegetables and drink water. And then you can see how me and my friends look compared to what everybody else looks like. And if that's okay, and if we're in good status and of good stature, then we can continue with our diet. And basically, at the end of the 10 days, not only did David and his friends look better than everybody else, their minds were sharper than everybody else. It says in Daniel chapter 1, verse 15, at the end of 10 days, Daniel and his 3 friends looked healthier and better nourished than the young men who had been eating the food assigned by the king. So after that, the attendant fed them only vegetables instead of food, and wine provided for the others. And then it continues to say in verse 17, God gave these 4 young men an unusual aptitude for understanding every aspect of literature and wisdom. And God gave Daniel the special ability to interpret the meanings of visions and dreams. In 18, it continues, when the training period ordered by the king was completed, the chief of staff brought all the young men to King Nebuchadnezzar. The king talked with them, and no one impressed him as much as Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. So they entered the royal service. Whenever the king consulted them in any matter requiring wisdom and balanced judgment, he found them 10 times more capable than any of the magicians and enchanters in his entire kingdom. Daniel remained in the royal service until the first year of the reign of King Cyrus. Oh my goodness. There is so much juice to squeeze out of that passage, but I'm not going to, because we got to touch base on chapter 2, which is the part of scripture that I wanted to highlight today, where King Nebuchadnezzar, the king who had taken the children of Israel into exile, has a dream. I'm just going to read this entire chapter, and then we're going to highlight a couple of things. It's kind of crazy. So, Daniel chapter 2. One night during the 2nd year of his reign, Nebuchadnezzar had such disturbing dreams that he couldn't sleep. He called in his magicians, enchanters, sorcerers, and astrologers, and he demanded that they tell him what he had dreamed. As they stood before the king, he said, "I have had a dream that deeply troubles me, and I must know what it means." Then the astrologers answered the king in Aramaic, "Long live the king! Tell us the dream, and we will tell you what it means." But the king said to the astrologers, "I'm serious about this. If you don't tell me what my dream was and what it means, you will be torn limb from limb, and your houses will be turned into heaps of rubble. But if you tell me what I dreamed and what the dream means, I will give you many wonderful gifts and honors. Just tell me the dream and what it means." They said again, "Please, your majesty, tell us the dream, and we will tell you what it means." The king replied, "I know what you are doing. You're stalling for time because you know I am serious when I say, if you don't tell me the dream, you are doomed. So you have conspired to tell me lies, hoping I will change my mind. But tell me the dream, and then I'll know that you can tell me what it means." The astrologers replied to the king, "No one on earth can tell the king his dream. And no king, however great and powerful, has ever asked such a thing of any magician, enchanter, or astrologer. The king's demand is impossible. No one except the gods can tell you your dream, and they do not live here among people." Oh, it's not exciting. The king was furious when he heard this, and he ordered that all the wise men of Babylon be executed. And because of the king's decree, men were sent to find and kill Daniel and his friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, also known as Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. All right, getting back to the text. Verse 14. When Arioch, or Arioch, I feel so bad that I'm killing these names. Arioch, I'm going to say Arioch. When Arioch, the commander of the king's guard, came to kill them, Daniel handled the situation with wisdom and discretion. He asked Arioch, "Why has the king issued such a harsh decree?" So Arioch told him all that had happened. Daniel went at once to see the king and requested more time to tell the king what the dream meant. Then Daniel went home and told his friends, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, what had happened. He urged them to ask the God of heaven to show them his mercy by telling them the secret, so they would not be executed along with the other wise men of Babylon. That night, the secret was revealed to Daniel in a vision. Then Daniel praised the God of heaven. He said, "Praise the name of God forever and ever, for he has all wisdom and power. He controls the course of world events. He removes kings and sets up other kings. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to the scholars. He reveals deep and mysterious things and knows what lies hidden in darkness, though he is surrounded by light. I thank and praise you, God of my ancestors, for you have given me wisdom and strength. You have told me what we asked of you and revealed to us what the king demanded." Oh, so good. So Daniel chapter 2, verse 24 continues. Then Daniel went to see Arioch, whom the king had ordered to execute the wise men of Babylon. Daniel said to him, "Don't kill the wise men. Take me to the king, and I will tell him the meaning of his dream." Arioch quickly took Daniel to the king and said, "I have found one of the captives," a little shade, we won't touch on that. "I have found one of the captives from Judah who will tell the king the meaning of his dream." The king said to Daniel, also known as Belshazzar, that was his Babylonian name, though we don't call him that. We call him Daniel. "Is this true? Can you tell me what my dream was and what it means?" Daniel replied, "There are no wise men, enchanters, magicians, or fortune tellers who can reveal the king's secret, but there is a God in heaven who reveals secrets, and he has shown King Nebuchadnezzar what will happen in the future. Now I will tell you your dream and the visions you saw as you lay on your bed. While your majesty was sleeping, you dreamed about coming events. He who reveals secrets has shown you what is going to happen. And it is not because I am wiser than anyone else that I know the secret of your dream, but because God wants you to understand what is in your heart. In your vision, your majesty, you saw standing before you a huge shining statue of a man. It was a frightening sight. The head of the statue was made of fine gold. Its chest and its arms were silver. Its belly and thighs were bronze. Its legs were iron, and its feet were a combination of iron and baked clay. As you watched, a rock was cut from a mountain, but not by human hands. It struck the feet of iron and clay, smashing them to bits. The whole statue was crushed into small pieces of iron, clay, bronze, silver, and gold. Then the wind blew them away without a trace, like chaff on a threshing floor. But the rock that knocked down the statue became a great mountain that covered the whole earth. That was the dream. Now we will tell the king what it means. Your Majesty, you are the greatest of kings. The God of heaven has given you sovereignty, power, strength, and honor. He has made you the ruler over all the inhabited world and has put even wild animals and birds under your control. You are the head of gold. But after your kingdom comes to an end, another kingdom, inferior to yours, will rise to take your place. After that kingdom has fallen, yet a third kingdom, represented by bronze, will rise to rule the world. Following that kingdom, there will be a fourth one, as strong as iron. That kingdom will smash and crush all previous empires, just as iron smashes and crushes everything it strikes. The feet and toes you saw were a combination of iron and baked clay, showing that this kingdom will be divided. Like iron mixed with clay, it will have some of the strength of iron. But while some parts of it will be as strong as iron, other parts will be as weak as clay. This mixture of iron and clay also shows that these kingdoms will try to strengthen themselves by forming alliances with each other through intermarriage. But they will not hold together, just as iron and clay do not mix. During the reigns of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed or conquered. It will crush all these kingdoms into nothingness, and it will stand forever. That is the meaning of the rock cut from the mountain, though not by human hands, that crushed to pieces the statue of iron, bronze, clay, silver, and gold. The great God was showing the king what will happen in the future. The dream is true, and its meaning is certain. So good! Oh my gosh. Okay, so now we're at Daniel chapter 2, verse 46. Then King Nebuchadnezzar threw himself down before Daniel and worshipped him. And he commanded his people to offer sacrifices and burn sweet incense before him. The king said to Daniel, "Truly, your God is the greatest of gods, the Lord over kings, a revealer of mysteries. For you have been able to reveal this secret." The king appointed Daniel to a high position and gave him many valuable gifts. He made Daniel ruler over the whole province of Babylon, as well as chief over all his wise men. At Daniel's request, the king appointed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to be in charge of all the affairs of the province of Babylon, while Daniel remained in the king's court. So good, right? Oh my goodness, such a good story. So many things to highlight here. When Daniel heard he was going to die, I'm sure he thought, dang man, I thought I was going to have a little more time here on this earth. And I'm pretty sure he was scared. Rather than thinking, I'm just going to let me and my friends die here in captivity, he did a couple of things. It says in chapter 2, verses 14 through 20, that when he heard the news, he asked questions. He asked the commander why the king was trying to kill them all. The second thing he did was he went to the king to ask for more time to figure out what could be done about this decree that had been issued for the king to kill all the wise men. But this is the thing that I want you to note, okay? In verse 17, it says, "Then Daniel went home and told his friends, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, what happened," okay? So he asked for support, okay? Think about it. He asked for support. Like Esther, Daniel was very specific about the ask and the type of support that he was enlisting his friends for, okay? He didn't just say, "Hey, y'all, I want to go to talk to the king, and we about to die, so I'm going to be praying and fasting, but I don't know what y'all are going to do." No, he asked them very specifically. Actually, it doesn't say he asked. He urged them to ask the God of heaven to show them his mercy by doing something very specific. Reveal the dream. Reveal what the king dreamt that nobody knows that he dreamt about, and tell us what it means. And then the third thing it mentions, it says that night that the secret was revealed to Daniel in a vision. Oh my gosh, which is so important to note, because if you remember from what we read in chapter 1, Daniel had received a special gift from the Lord to be able to interpret visions and dreams. Even that is something to note, because Daniel's ability to be separated or set apart or seen as different was in part due to his obedience and his desire to be set apart that we've seen, witnessed, and experienced from chapter 1. And he was aware of certain things that he knew the Lord would or wouldn't want. And so he separated himself. And because of this, the Lord was able to not only give him gifts, but he was clear-minded and aware of what his gifts were so that he could use them to build up his community. But again, he didn't do this on his own. So good. The last thing we see that happened here in verse 20 is after the Lord had revealed the vision to Daniel and gave him the meaning, it says, then Daniel praised the God of heaven. Okay? He praised the Lord for everything that he was doing, everything that he did, and for, it says in verse 23, giving him strength and wisdom and telling him, or them, because it says, you have told me what we, his community, it wasn't him by himself. You have told me what we asked of you and revealed to us what the king demanded. Are you starting to see a pattern? Because let me tell you, a pattern is emerging. I'm so excited. There are a couple of other things to highlight about this passage, but I don't want to go too deep into it. The first thing is that once Arioch brought Daniel to the king to reveal what the dream and the vision was, he was a little shady with it when he said, I have found one of the captives from Judah who will tell the king. Like, the king didn't ask who he was and where he came from, but it was almost as though Arioch wanted to make a point of making sure that the king knew that it was a captive. So he was calling him by his slave identity, but Daniel knew that that wasn't who he was. He was so much more than a quote-unquote captive, okay? He was put in that position as a captive to do God's work. And he did that, but he didn't rely solely on his own ability to do it. He called his community to participate in saving themselves. Are you picking up what I'm putting down? But then when you get to chapter 2, verse 46, after Daniel has revealed what the dream is, it says here, then King Nebuchadnezzar threw himself down before Daniel and worshipped him. What king do you know that's worshiping captives? They're captives at that. Nobody. But it just goes to show how where you start isn't where you're going to end. It's also worth noting that it's not about how other people see you. It's about knowing how you see yourself in the season that you're in and in the gifts that you've been giving. Understanding that though somebody called you something, because he was a captive, so technically he was the king's slave to some degree, okay? But here you have the king bowing down to worship one of his own captives because he was able to do something that no one else could in his entire kingdom. But Daniel recognizes that it wasn't his power, but it was God's power working in him and through him that allowed him to divulge what the dream was and its meaning. And he says such. He doesn't take credit for it. After Daniel had revealed this dream, guess what? He was not only elevated in the kingdom, King Nebuchadnezzar made Daniel ruler over the whole province of Babylon, as well as chief over all his wise men. So the magicians, the enchanters, the fortune tellers, sorcerers, all of them. At Daniel's request, verse 49, the king appointed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to be in charge of all the affairs of the province of Babylon. So once Daniel was elevated, as he was amplified in status, he was able to bring his community with him. So what was Daniel able to do? Not only was he able to save his community, but he was also able to amplify, edify, and share his influence with others around him. It wasn't just Daniel's responsibility to care for his community. His community also cared for itself by supporting him in his ability to use his gifts as he was going before the king. So the community benefited. His community benefited in more than one way. Oh man, so exciting. And through this, King Nebuchadnezzar comes to know the Lord. And there, oh my gosh, if you go through the rest of the chapter of Daniel, this happens on more than one occasion. It took a while for Nebuchadnezzar to recognize who the Lord was and what he was doing, but he came to recognize who the Lord was for himself. And even that was a juicy story, which actually brings me to the third and final story that I want to share. And maybe this is enough for this episode, but I just want to highlight the consistency, okay, the trend that is emerging around this conversation around building up community, making the most of your time, and making sure that you're not sacrificing yourself in the process. Because I'm sure that this applies to you as a busy working woman, mother, caregiver, entrepreneur, and what else, okay? This time, we are in 1 Samuel chapter 20, and this is the story of Jonathan and King David. At this point in history, King David is being hunted by Jonathan's father, King Saul. King Saul was the appointed king for some time, but the Lord's anointing had left him and had already fallen on David. And so he was a little jelly, okay? Because of this, he had basically tried on multiple attempts to kill David. And David was telling Jonathan, your daddy don't like me. He's trying to kill me. And Jonathan was like, no, my dad's not trying to kill you. And so David and Jonathan come up with a plan to see what's what. We'll get into that after this quick break.
For almost a decade, I'd been looking for the perfect planner system, but every time I thought I found a planner that met my time management needs, there always seemed to be something missing. Most of the planners that I would use failed to meet all of my needs and considerations as an entrepreneurial mom. And when I wasn't able to hit every single task that I set out to do for the day, it often left me feeling like I was failing to meet my own expectations. Okay, cue the disappointment, the guilt, and all the other things that we try to avoid when we're productive overachievers. Can you relate to this at all? I'm sure you can. Right? And it's for this very reason that I decided to create my own planner called the Journey Daily Planner, which prioritized my mental health and well-being first in order to influence and inspire more productivity and fulfillment in my life, career, and relationships. This planner system was created with busy women, busy parents, busy caregivers, busy entrepreneurs in mind to provide clarity in what you do. But more importantly, it was created with the intention of highlighting why you do the things that you do. Overall, the main point of this planner is to make sure that you are including fun in your quest for productivity. Because as I always say in the Journey to Purpose, joy is our job. And the moment we're able to get clear on what brings us joy and we're able to understand how that joy is connected to our purpose, then we're able to selfishly live in our joy and in service to others, but not from a space of obligation and overwhelm. So with all that being said, if you are interested in getting a Journey Daily Planner for yourself, make sure you head on over to ericalasan.com and purchase your Journey Daily Planner today. Okay. And remember, we're on the journey together, one feel-good thing at a time.
And we're back, and we're back, and we're back. We are at 1 Samuel chapter 20. David now fled from Naioth to Ramah and found Jonathan. What have I done? He exclaimed. What is my crime? How have I offended your father that he is so determined to kill me? That's not true, Jonathan protested. You are not going to die. He always tells me everything he's going to do, even the little things. I know my father wouldn't hide something like this from me. It just isn't so. Then David took an oath before Jonathan and said, your father knows perfectly well about our friendship. So he has said to himself, I won't tell Jonathan. Why should I hurt him? But I swear to you that I am only a step away from death. I swear it by the Lord and by your own soul. Tell me what I can do to help you, Jonathan exclaimed. David replied, tomorrow we celebrate the New Moon Festival. I've always eaten with the king on this occasion, but tomorrow I'll hide in the field and stay there until the evening of the third day. If your father asks where I am, tell him I asked permission to go home to Bethlehem for an annual family sacrifice. If he says fine, you will know all is well. But if he's angry and loses his temper, you will know he is determined to kill me. Show me this loyalty as my sworn friend, for we made a solemn pact before the Lord, or kill me yourself if I've sinned against your father. But please don't betray me to him." "Never," Jonathan exclaimed. "You know that if I had the slightest notion my father was planning to kill you, I would tell you at once." Then David asked, "How will I know whether or not your father is angry?" "Come out to the field with me," Jonathan replied, and they went out there together. Then Jonathan told David, "I promise by the Lord, the God of Israel, that by this time tomorrow, or the next day at the latest, I will talk to my father and let you know at once how he feels about you. If he speaks favorably about you, I will let you know. But if he is angry and wants you killed, may the Lord strike me and even kill me if I don't warn you, so you can escape and live. May the Lord be with you as he used to be with my father." Dang, those are some crazy words. Oh man, we're at verse 14. "And may you treat me with the same faithful love of the Lord as long as I live. But if I die, treat my family with this faithful love, even when the Lord destroys all your enemies from the face of the earth." Which is crazy because one of his enemies may be his dad. Verse 16. "So Jonathan made a solemn pact with David, saying, 'May the Lord destroy all your enemies.' And Jonathan made David reaffirm his vow of friendship again, for Jonathan loved David as he loved himself." You see the setup. Now, skipping to 1 Samuel chapter 20, verses 27 through 34. At this point, Jonathan is talking to his daddy because the plan is in effect. And this is what took place. When David's place was empty again the next day, Saul asked Jonathan, "Why hasn't the son of Jesse been here for the meal, either yesterday or today?" Jonathan replied, "David earnestly asked me if he could go to Bethlehem. He said, 'Please let me go, for we are having a family sacrifice. My brother demanded that I be there. So please let me go away to see my brothers. That's why he isn't here at the king's table.'" Saul boiled with rage at Jonathan. In verse 30 it says, and I don't like using these words, but I'm going to say it just because scripture says it. "You stupid son of a whore," he swore at him. "Do you think I don't know that you want him to be king in your place?" Referring to David now. "Shaming yourself and your mother? As long as that son of Jesse is alive, you'll never be king. Now go and get him so I can kill him." Okay, no hidden signals, straight shots, straight words coming from his father. Verse 32. "But why should he be put to death?" Jonathan asked his father. "What has he done?" Then Saul hurled his spear at Jonathan, intending to kill him. So at last, Jonathan realized that his father was really determined to kill David, which is crazy. Jonathan left the table in fierce anger and refused to eat on that second day of the festival, for he was crushed by his father's shameful behavior towards David. We're just going to finish it, okay? Verses 35 through 42. "David came out from where he had been hiding near the stone pile. Then David bowed 3 times to Jonathan with his face to the ground. Both of them were in tears as they embraced each other and said goodbye, especially David. At last, Jonathan said to David, 'Go in peace, for we have sworn loyalty to each other in the Lord's name. The Lord is the witness of a bond between us and our children forever.' Then David left and Jonathan returned to the town." So sad, but such a wonderful story of friendship. All right, there are a couple of things I want to highlight from this passage of scripture that speak to this point of building community and serving others without sacrificing yourself. Now, David was just trying to serve the people of Israel through his role as a warrior and a person in King Saul's court. But Saul's jealousy was getting the best of him. And so rather than keeping his suffering to himself, he mentioned how he was feeling to his friend Jonathan, who also happened to be King Saul's son. But in sharing what he was feeling and outright saying, "Look, I think your dad's trying to kill me. Actually, no, I know your dad's trying to kill me," he also set up a specific way to know whether or not this was true. So he called on Jonathan being his community, to support him in getting through this moment of fear, suffering, worry, and also in making sure that his reasoning was sound in going through this. But again, there were specifics involved. There was a specific plan to know and test whether or not King Saul was actually trying to kill David. There was a whole plan involved about the arrows being shot, David being in a place of hiding. So there was agreement in what needed to be done. And with this, when they came up with this plan and Jonathan put it to the test and saw that his dad was actually indeed trying to kill David, there was a pact that was created between the both of them. So not only did Jonathan help save David, but in his assisting David, there was a plan in place that protected future generations and Jonathan's lineage, which is wild because in doing this, in effect, it also saved King Saul's lineage because Saul was Jonathan's father. And David was faithful to that pact even after Jonathan died. It's a really great story. Hopefully, at this point, you've seen the trend here. I hope that these three stories illustrate to you the importance of not only feeling like you have to carry the weight and the burden of your community, but understanding that you can build your community by getting them involved in the process of saving and building and carrying themselves as well. There's reciprocity and a cycle of balance that is required so that everybody can be elevated and amplified in the journey. Okay, so with all of those stories being shared, I want to highlight the 5-step process that you can begin to use to build your community without sacrificing yourself in the process. And it has to do with the trend that emerged in all 3 of these stories. You ready? I know you are. Let's dive in. The 5-step process for caring for others without sacrificing yourself in the process. Number 1, the first step to caring for others without sacrificing yourself is to open your mouth. Don't stay quiet. There's something to be said about sharing your fears, your worries, your concerns, and all the other things that you may be internally carrying regarding your role and responsibilities in caring for others around you. And I am talking about this in regards to your family life. I'm talking about this in regards to your work life. And I'm talking about this even in terms of your relationship with your friends. How often do you feel things? Are you carrying the weight of something mentally and you're just afraid to speak up and share those things out loud? Let me tell you, sis, the moment you begin to release those things is the moment that God can begin to work in you, through you, and with you in finding solutions. And sometimes those solutions can be found in your community. Looking at Esther, Jonathan, and even the story of Daniel, one of the first things they did was open their mouth. They were not quiet about the things that were bothering them and the reasons why. So I say that of you. Open your mouth. What is it that's currently bothering you? And who is it that you can begin to share these struggles, these pains, these worries, and these fears with? Number 2, the second thing you can do to begin to care for others without sacrificing yourself is to communicate your needs. Now that you've released the thoughts and the fears and the worries and the things that you may be carrying internally, what do you need? No, seriously. Think about it. The moment you begin to state out loud or even begin to consider for yourself what it is that you need, those words, those things that you're verbalizing then become specific problems that can find solutions. So communicate your needs and do this not only for yourself, but for others. Because when you're just saying things, but you're not communicating what it is that you need in order to fix them, it comes off as complaining. Don't forget to highlight the importance of why you need these things, because that's one of the key parts of the process in helping other people understand how they can support you in this season. Consider Esther. What she needed was for her uncle Mordecai and all the Jews, actually, that's what she said. She said, tell all the Jews in Susa to fast and pray for me for 3 days. Same thing with Daniel. He told his friends to pray for God's grace and mercy that he should reveal to them what the dream was. Same thing with David and Jonathan. He asked his friend to test whether or not his dad, King Saul, was actually trying to kill him. And he outlined the reason why. Because in his mind, he was the only one that saw the situation for what it was. So, saying all of that, What is it for you in this season as you may be feeling the weight and the burden of carrying your community or helping others or caring for others? What is it that you need to start creating more time for yourself so that you can start on this journey to joy? And honestly, the list can go on and on about what those things may look like. And actually, if you're in a season where you're trying to figure out what that may look like for you and what you need and how others can begin to support you, I have a program called the Joy Quest that could potentially support. I'll include a link to that in the description box and the show notes below, which actually brings me to number 3. The third step in caring for your community without sacrificing for yourself is to delegate, okay? Delegate and call others to take part in the process of caring for themselves. Are you hearing me? I say this and I say this often, but no one is meant to do anything alone. This idea that you are meant to carry your family, carry people in your job, that you're supposed to carry the weight of your friends and then put yourself last actually isn't true. There is supposed to be a cycle of care. And if we look at scriptures throughout the Bible, if we look at stories in the Bible, we see the cycle of care and we see how the Lord puts processes and systems in order so that everyone in the community is taken care of. Look at the book of Leviticus and the laws that were set out. Look at the Sabbath and how the Lord talked about even caring for orphans and widows and the poor among the community. Everyone is meant to take care of each other. It's not something where only one person is meant to carry the weight of everything and everyone around them. That's Jesus's job. Think about, again, the story of Esther, Daniel, and David. They each called members of their community to fast and pray with them. And in doing so, the community was able to thrive. And the individuals that took part in contributing to the success of the ask were elevated and amplified in the community. So recognize that you're doing this and asking the people to support you in contributing to the work. They're actually also helping themselves. It takes the burden off of you, but it also empowers them. And real quick, I want to take a sidebar to just talk to the mothers out there, all right? Especially the working mothers that are feeling the weight of caring for their community and feeling overwhelmed and overworked and just over it. Recognize that this conversation around delegation and calling others to contribute also speaks to your home and your children. Okay, if you are a mother that is overwhelmed because you are carrying the weight of doing everything in your home, the dishes, the cleaning, the laundry, the homework, the laying out the clothes, the ironing, like, I don't know what you have to do in your house. At one point, people would come to me and talk about how good my kids were. Oh, your kids are such great listeners. Oh, your kids do this. Oh my goodness, I can't believe your kids, though they're only 6 and 8, make their own lunch, make their own breakfast, and they do the dishes and they sort their laundry. Yes, my kids do all of those things. And you know what? I never considered it a flex. Because, you know, by God's grace, that's the only way that these things have happened. He's given so much wisdom and understanding around how any of this works as I've been going on my journey to purpose. But now that I'm looking at it, it is a flex. Sis, get your flex on. Get your children involved in the home that they are a part of. Get your partner and your spouse involved. You are not meant to do all of the things alone. And in doing so, not only will you be creating time and energy for yourself to focus on your joy and the God-given gifts that God has given you to serve others, but in a way that elevates you and doesn't drain you. That's just one of the benefits. The other benefit is that your children learn how to set themselves up for life. You empower them for their future. Tell me that. Start delegating and calling others to contribute to the work of building up your home and your community. Okay? Which actually brings me to the fourth part of this process. The fourth step in caring for others without sacrificing yourself is to be clear, okay? There needs to be clear expectations around what you are asking people to do, especially when you start delegating tasks. You can't just say, I just need help. I just need help. No, we're clear on the fact that you need help, but what kind of help do you need? Again, going back to these Bible stories, each of the individuals, as they were asking for help, was very clear about what they needed the other people to do. Okay? Esther needed them to pray and fast for 3 days. Daniel, he obviously had the gift to interpret the vision and the dream, but he needed to know what the dream was. So he called on his friends to support him in asking the Lord to be merciful and save their lives by revealing what the dream was. Same thing with David and Jonathan. He was very specific about how he would know whether or not Jonathan's dad wanted to kill him. With each of these things, it was so specific that the point wouldn't be missed. And they would be clear at when they had arrived at success. So what is your version of success? What is your vision for success? And when you're asking others to support you, be clear in explaining what that process looks like. And each person is also clear in what they're supposed to be doing. Without that, there's still bound to be chaos and confusion. Which brings me to the fifth and final part of this process of how you can begin to care for others without sacrificing yourself so that you can get your time back. Give thanks and praise God. Thank God for what he's doing, because even though right now you may be in the trenches and you may be feeling overwhelmed, there's still joy to be had here, and God is currently working things out for his glory and your good. And I would even like to commend you on the fact that you recognize you need support in this time, because one of the biggest blocks to joy is a lack of self-awareness. And I would even venture to say the fact that you have found this podcast and you're listening through is a sign that God is doing something amazing in your life. So I want to commend you and I want to congratulate you. I just hope that you take time to thank God for what he's doing, because he is putting you on a path that will not only heal and benefit you, but it will heal and benefit everyone else around you for generations to come. We also saw this exemplified in the stories that were shared, especially when it came to Daniel and the dream being revealed to him. Not only did he praise God right after he received the revelation of the dream and its meaning, but even as he was reciting what the dream was and what it meant to King Nebuchadnezzar, when King Nebuchadnezzar started to thank him and bow down to worship him, Daniel said, "No, it's not me that reveals dreams. It is he that gives dreams that has revealed this to me so that I could share it with you." And the same goes for you and the journey that you're on. The Lord is working in you. The Lord is working through you so that you can support and heal others around you, but in a way where he gets the glory, not you. So take joy in relaxing in this time, sis, and take joy in your ability to create time for yourself through this process. All right. It's time for a quick recap of these 5 steps that you can begin to use to start caring for your community without sacrificing yourself. Quick rundown, starting now. Step 1, don't stay quiet. Open your mouth and communicate your fears, your worries, and whatever may be bothering you in this time. Step 2, after you begin to release your thoughts and your feelings, start communicating your needs to others around you, because stating the problems without recognizing and verbalizing potential solutions just comes off as complaining. And remember, this process of communicating your needs not only benefits you, but it benefits others around you and understanding how they can support you in the solutions that you're providing. Step 3 is to delegate and call others to contribute to supporting the community as well. This not only benefits you in helping you buy back your time, but it also empowers them with life skills that will carry them through the rest of their life. Step 4 is to be clear. There needs to be clear expectations. What needs to be done? Who is the person that's doing it? And how will you be sure that you've arrived at the destination? Think about it and make sure you state those things so everyone is on the same page. Which brings us to the 5th and final part of this process, which is to praise God and give thanks, because he's already working. The fact that you are in this space and recognizing that you need support, and the fact that you care so much about the community around you and the people that you serve, that you're considering yourself in this process, isn't a coincidence. You need to care for yourself so that you can care for others. And God is doing a wonderful thing in allowing you to recognize that you don't have to be burnt out and overwhelmed in order to have your community be taken care of. Community creates a cycle of care. And with this, you get to have free time and understanding how you can even better serve your community. So, now that I've said all of this, I want to just wrap this up and put a real pretty bow on it, okay? What does this episode mean for you? To state it plainly, sis, we are all meant to care for each other. The job of caring for your community is not yours and yours alone. I hope that today's episode and this process and these Bible stories that have been shared with you have helped illustrate why, one, you are meant to have free time, but two, how you can begin this process of caring for everyone without sacrificing yourself so that you can release the guilt of feeling like you are meant to do so much on your own. And so that you can also begin to prioritize joy in your life. Oh man, I'm so excited for you. That brings us to the end of this week's episode. I hope that you've enjoyed it. I would love to hear where in the journey you are. As a matter of fact, let's start this process right now, shall we? Where is it in your journey that you could potentially use more support starting now? What is one area of your life that you feel is heavy or that you're overwhelmed in, or where you just want community support and you want to release it? State those things in the comments, sis. Ooh, and if you're someone that's looking for a deep dive on how you can start the process of managing your time, your tasks, and your to-dos with joy, there is another podcast episode that you should listen to, and I'll share it right here. In the meantime, between time, if you're looking to learn how the Journey to Purpose can serve you in your journey, I have a really fun quiz to help you learn how you can start the process of creating more time, energy, and space for yourself in your life, career, and relationships. I'll be including a link to that in the description and the show notes. And with that, you'll be added to our bi-weekly newsletter called Journey Mail, and you'll receive some love notes from me in your inbox. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. And if you know of anyone that could benefit from it, a friend, a family member, I don't know, anybody, please feel free to share it with them so that they can join us on the journey. I think that's it. This baby's starting to get loud. I look forward to seeing you in our next faith-fueled, purpose-propelled chat. Until the next time, remember, we're on the journey together, one feel-good thing at a time. Bye!